but I suppose we should get started. So welcome everybody to the April Arcadia Book Club discussion of Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, Pulitzer Prize winner of Evicted. Another important book with Wisconsin, Madison connections as well. So a little mea culpa here. Oops, I'm going to add Alan here. I'm the one that chose this book. James read it last year when it came out in hardcover, and I just really wanted to read it. And wow, this is a tough one. This is a book that I just wanted to throw across the room 20 times, not because I didn't like the book, but because I didn't like what the book had to say. And it just, it's pretty appalling. It's pretty appalling. And, of course, the James Baldwin quote of "it's expensive to be poor" just kept going through my head over and over again. So, yeah, I think let's just get into it. It seemed like a good book to pick during election year. When we think of how best to benefit all Americans, and clearly we are not. So does anybody want to jump in and give their feelings on?
In an election year, you're supposed to worry about how to benefit all Americans.
That's right.
No, I didn't know that. Oh.
I think we should each send a copy of this book to our Congress people.
Yeah. I agree. It should be mandatory reading. This instead of Paul Ryan's, Ayn Rand, which is like the opposite of this book.
Right.
Part of the cause of this book. All right, Diane, did you want to say anything else other than?
Yeah, I took issue with one thing that he said, with his math on something, because when the orange guy's tax cuts went through, there was a cap put on the amount of mortgage interest and real estate taxes you can deduct. So, and that actually really harmed a lot of working class people. I know here in Illinois, somebody, for example, living in, an exurb like McHenry, in kind of like an average house, but with a 3% real estate tax bill and maybe a $200,000 mortgage, would be way over that cap. So it really hurt a lot of working class and middle class people. So that mortgage interest deduction is not as great as he thinks it is. But otherwise, my whole career was in banking, and most of it in mortgage lending, and he was, spot on with the issues of people being unbanked and having to use currency exchanges and check cashing, payday lenders, and the overdraft fees, and the cost of getting a mortgage. It's just, if you've got a substantial down payment and a great credit score, you're going to get the best rate. And from the bank's perspective, that's risk-based pricing, right? But if you're poor or working class, and let's say you don't have good medical insurance or any medical insurance, and you've got medical collections, you're going to have a bad credit score, and probably less of a down payment, and you're going to pay a way higher rate and way higher costs. And that doesn't even begin to get to, racist appraisers and unscrupulous loan officers and, all the other things involved there. So it's pretty depressing. But I thought that, when he talked about solutions, that just enforcing the tax laws we already have could bring in $1 trillion. It's inexcusable that this goes on.
Right. Yes. Right. I agree that, that was like the big point for me too, is that we're not, even if the richest of the rich aren't asked to pay more, if they're just asked to pay what they owe. And so much money is spent trying to evade taxes, and for what? I just read something that Mackenzie Bezos, I don't think she's going by that last name anymore. I can't remember what her maiden name is, has given away more money in 2 years than her ex-husband gave away in a lifetime. And she's just making it her mission to get this money out, give it to the people that need it, and support the arts, and do everything with that, which is amazing. And why can't that be the competition? Who can give away the most instead of who can hoard the most among the.
Yeah, and Mark Cuban just posted how proud he was to pay his, I don't know, 200 some million in income taxes, because he and I had some of my wealthy clients were like that too, that who were entrepreneurs.
Oh no, it's in my ears.
And basically said that in no other country could they have built the businesses that they built, and they felt privileged, and they were fine with paying what they owed because they knew what they got by living here.
Right.
I thought the Mark Cuban comment was very good too, just simply because he just was sticking it to the orange guy and saying, this is, if you're really rich, you pay taxes. But I thought what I saw through it, and it goes back, in the late 70s and early 80s, I worked with a number of not-for-profits and things in Chicago dealing with that. And so it took me back to those years and the discussion of what, coming out of the Great Society, what we were trying to do to reduce poverty. And it struck me more than anything else now that with the Black Lives Matters and everything, that there was systemic racism, and that the racism is almost at the heart of American poverty. If you strike out the racism, we would be willing to deal with things.
Right. So that's going to be as easy to do as eliminating poverty.
Right.
Right. This is going to be a really cheery and uplifting conversation, but still important that we're talking. I mean, I know that I am beyond lucky with the luck of my parents and where I was born and when I was born. But I guess I didn't think about it as much as my parents gave us a loan for our mortgage, and my kids have an ed vest that's paid for their college tuition, and all these things that you don't think of as middle class welfare. That yes, I am getting as much benefit. I'm getting more benefit than the lowest on the income scale. Oops, hold on. Okay, sorry. My computer wanted to make an update right in the middle of this.
Thank you, Bill Gates.
So folks, if you're on mute, just unmute yourself. If you want to talk, it looks like, I don't know if it's kind of, I'm using a different laptop than I usually use. So if you want to say something, just unmute yourself and go.
Well, I think I suppose you could have picked the worst time to publish a book like this, but I think it's right up there. I mean, our Congress isn't dealing with anything, let alone poverty. And it seemed to me when I read this, I thought, boy, this is so far down the list on most people's things to get accomplished that it's not even going to make a wave. And and then last week I read in the Post somewhere that the income working I don't know what it's called, working class or working income credit,
Earned income credit.
yeah, it passed the House of Representatives amazingly, because everybody thought it was a good idea to raise 500,000 kids out of poverty, but then it got stuck in the Senate, and for the same reason that some of the other stuff is, it is a positive off a checklist for some government getting something done. And some Republicans are balking at that. Now, I don't know if it ever passed the Senate. I certainly didn't hear it passed and got signed. So I'm assuming that's stalled out too. And this is just a reflection of everything that's going on now and how important the next election is. But to try to get this as a priority right now strikes me as very difficult. And I can't believe things like Wisconsin should be dealing with, like the payday loans and that sort of thing, which are just outrageous and used to be capped in Wisconsin, and now all of a sudden they're not again. Those issues aren't even being dealt with anymore. It seems to be like it's a free for all. Everybody just take as much as you can get, and that's it. So my comment on the book is good facts to know, good to know somebody's still looking at all this stuff. I thought his footnotes were really good. Some of them, the ones that were more extended and have a little more argument to go with the footnote, were even better. But I thought overall impact is tough times for this kind of thinking. So hopefully it'll make, if you add this to all the other stuff that's going on, it'll make the elections more meaningful, hopefully. I'm not holding my breath anymore.
I had a question. Can you hear me? Or am I
Yes.
muted?
No, you're good.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get to read the book. But I wonder if he addresses this sort of American or a subset of American values that seems to regard poor people with huge suspicion. I can't remember exactly what the name is, but something was proposed that would have helped. There was a federal program that would have helped feed children in poverty over the summer holidays, the vacation times. And many Republicans fault governors because their state would be required to cover administrative costs. They didn't want to do that because they thought people might buy junk food or look at childhood obesity, let alone childhood hunger. I mean, I just found it so appalling. And the root of it was, well, you can't give poor people money because they won't know how to spend it wisely, and we're not going to help, even if this money is free from, did he talk about that? Or
He did
no?
address those kinds of biases, Janet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The good news about that particular issue is that a few of the states, there's been so much pushback to their wanting to say no to them that a number of states have turned around and are doing and have decided to join that program. So that's
wonderful.
That's one good news, but it's
Sure.
it's so terrible. Oh my God, it's terrible. Okay, God's going to mute himself again.
Well, and I think one of the I won't say issues, because there was a lot of stuff that, okay, I knew some things, but I ignore them, don't pay attention to them, and learn new information, like the whole payday thing. So on balance, it was a great book to read. But my question about it is, if we want to have a discussion about poverty and try to make people change their minds, somehow I just don't think this is the book that's going to do it. And I don't, it seemed like he was preaching to the choir a little bit too much, and sometimes a little bit strident. And I'm not saying that this issue doesn't need people to be strident, but if you're looking at this book to change people's minds, I'm a little afraid that it's that it wouldn't be effective.
It can put, I know, Charlotte, there were times I would agree with that, because there were times when I was reading and I found myself feeling really defensive. And you know, I think one of the things that I found that like the different, how do you make changes? It seemed like a lot of what he was saying falls to, you're almost making a moral or an ethical choice. I mean, you're asking people, you know, okay, what's the reality? Am I never going to shop at Amazon? Am I never going to take advantage of any of these things? You know, am I going to check out every single thing that I buy to make sure that it's been made by people making fair wages? That's, I mean, I think it's all things we should think about, but it's a lot, it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask of people. And I don't know, I think I mean, if there were concrete answers, we would have solved the issue. But yeah.
I did find valuable the two things that were really valuable to me were sort of the mindset or how you view the issue. And those were 2 points. One was not to think about things as being scarce. That after all, this is the richest country in the world. And I agree with his point that I don't think we really understand how rich we really, really are. I remember teaching Boy Scouts to get their citizenship badges. And one of them was citizenship in the world. And I asked another parent who was the economic,
He was in Invest UK.
yeah, he was one of the economic specialists at the Chicago British Council. And when we were talking about the country, he just said, you know, this state of California has more GDP than the country of England, than the UK does. And I think we need to think about, we need to get over this notion of scarcity, as he pointed out. The other thing I found interesting was his concept of targeted universality, that established programs that give something to everyone, but on a stepped kind of basis that matches their need. And I thought, well, now that maybe that could make a lot of sense, because we can, give something to affluent people, but it's not going to be as much as you would give to people that are poor. And so I thought that if people could think of programs that were universal, but structure them so that the biggest benefit went to the poorest people, I thought that was an interesting concept. And I'd like to see people work on that issue a lot more.
I think one of the points that he made too, when he was talking about what we've lost, when he talks about how many lost Einsteins there are, because we don't invest in, early childhood education is so important. And if you're living in a poor area, you don't have Montessori preschool and you don't have the best grade schools, and so you've got kids that they're never going to reach their full potential because they've never had the opportunity that people in a wealthier school district have. And I think that's an argument that might, be more convincing than like Mary Pat said, you can only do as much as you can do. You can't solve anything, but that doesn't mean you can't try to do some things. And, I know somebody the other day was complaining about having to pay $12 for a meal at McDonald's. And this is somebody who lives in $1 million house and has a 6-figure income, and was complaining about how expensive it was to have lunch at McDonald's because he had to pay $12. And I thought, these are people who are finally making more than $7.50 an hour, and you're griping about your $12 meal. It just was astonishing to me.
Larry, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes. I'm basically going to disagree with most of what's been said, except for Al's comment about the importance of elections, because I just got reelected to my 7th term as a Waukesha County supervisor by a whopping 44 votes, because WISRED, the local arm of the Waukesha County Republican Party, targeted me because, oh no, I admit to be a Democrat in Waukesha County. But I just want to tell you that the thing that I strongly agree with Al is which party has control of the Senate, which party that has control of the House, and who the next president will be will absolutely determine whether these things could happen or not. Because the media has not covered what the American Rescue Plan that was passed after President Biden was elected and the Democrats controlled both parties of Congress. The last 2 years, my conservative Waukesha County government has done more than in the first 10 years, because for the first time, we had money to do things. For example, I led the fight for us to greatly expand our embedded mental health professionals, working with our conservative sheriff's department, our Waukesha Police Department, the emergency call center. And now when there's a call, they get there in 20 minutes instead of 40 minutes. If the mental health professional and the law enforcement determine it's not a criminal activity, law enforcement gets back on the road. They hopefully get the person the help that they need. And this expansion was totally funded by the ARPA funds. ARPA funds also enabled us to create a new crisis response center in our mental health center to meet people that are in crisis, again, with ARPA funds. We reduced our criminal case backlog with ARPA funds. We gave raises to our underpaid deputy sheriffs. And what's interesting is I don't think the majority of my board, which includes 22 out of 25 as Republicans, I don't think most of them know that the ARPA funds were passed with only Democratic votes, not one Republican vote. But the impact has been tremendous. The child income tax credit that was part of that cut child poverty in half. Now it's expiring. There was an effort to expand it, but that will depend on the next president and the next Congress. I'm active in the National Association of Counties. I served for 4 years on something called the Economic Mobility Leadership Network, which was about 20-some county officials from across the country. And you will be shocked to learn it was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We traveled all over the country to see what our best practices on immigration, poverty, other issues. And this book, I am going to be recommending this book to everybody that I know, because it does, to me, the best job of laying out the facts on immigration, the facts on how to end child poverty, the facts of what to do about affordable housing. And again, it doesn't get publicity, but there have been tremendous strides in almost all of these areas. So I want to disagree with all the pessimism. If you elect the right people, not only at the federal level, but at the state level, whether Tammy Baldwin gets reelected or her opponent gets elected, it's going to be a huge difference. But the same thing with the state legislature and the same thing with your local mayors, county supervisors, and aldermen. But I found this book tremendously hopeful because this whole economic mobility issue is my generation, the baby boomers, we almost all were upwardly economically mobile compared to the World War II generation of our parents. Now, almost the majority of younger people are downwardly mobile for many of the reasons, but I thought he did a great job exposing the banking industry, the payday loans things, but he had great basic facts that lay out why it doesn't have to be this way. And so it's a lot of what I mean, I guess the most shocking thing to me that I don't feel I understood, I didn't feel I understood the effect of segregation as much as the way he laid it out, because as a former teacher, there you definitely would notice that many of the students that were struggling were coming from a lower socioeconomic background. But a lot of the schools still have special programs to help them. So I'm going to try to get off my soapbox and stop talking. But I just want to tell you, after being an elected official for 22 years, there are so many good things happening. All right, I've thought of one more thing. I serve on this Community Action Coalition Board of South Central Wisconsin, which is Waukesha County, Jefferson County, and Dane County. And our mission is to end poverty in those three counties. And again, because of the ARPA funding, we've gotten more money. We've done more to help people with food security, housing, addressing mental health and substance use problems. So there are amazing good things going on, but because you have somebody who is running for president who is in court every day and creating scandals, and you know the supposed polarization, I don't think the polarization is actually as bad as it's publicized, but the good stuff that's going on, and he does highlight some of it in this book. I just feel very energized and empowered by the book, because I disagree with whoever said that a book cannot change things, because this Harvard professor, Roz Chetty, who did all this research on mobility to show why are people in certain zip codes having problems, it's all tied into this. And there is a movement out there. One last thing I'll say, as a former teachers union activist, the labor unions are stronger than they've been in like 40 years, going back to President Reagan. And so he talked about, you know, minimum wage and fight for 15. If people live in a blue state, those things are happening. Look at Michigan next door, or Illinois. We're a purple state, so it's much harder here. But my concluding comment will be, look what happened with electing the right person to the state Supreme Court, that we're having fair maps for the first time. So I'll stop talking now, but I'm very happy, Nancy, that you picked this book. I thought it's one of the best nonfiction books I've read in years.
Great. Thank you, Larry. Did you read Evicted?
I'm embarrassed to say I've only read about Evicted, but now I definitely want to read it. But I I was very pleased to see he gave some positive examples from his time in Milwaukee of neighborhood programs that are working. Last August, I was part of a NACO prenatal to 3 conference, and we went to this Penfield Children's Center in Milwaukee that is doing incredible work with preschool and young children with problems, but they have funding issues. But we went there because they're an example of best practices. So tell me, was Evicted more depressing or less depressing?
It's about the same. It's just a wake up call, and about the demonization of poor people, who, especially children, who are poor through no fault of their own. But I am glad to say that the high school seniors in AP English at River Valley read Evicted. So that's a good thing, to send kids off into the world like that as young adults.
I just want to say one thing about the food programs and helping the lower part of America level of poverty eat good food and eat food, period. I've directed a lot of plays by George Bernard Shaw, and done a lot of research about class struggle, because Shaw was so much about class struggle, and the thing he abhorred more than anything was poverty. But they always got actors' attention when I would tell them the following statistic, that in 1905 in England, an upper middle class 12-year-old was 25 pounds heavier and 4 inches taller than a child in poverty in a working class family. And the other thing that Shaw just went over and over about was that at every level of culture in life, or in every strata of any culture, there are incredibly wonderful people who many of them never get an opportunity because of the circumstances of the way that their society is set up. That there are brilliant people all over the place that we will never know about because no one's ever.
Oh, we lost you there at the very end, James. But right, if kids are given, and okay, excuse my dog here. If kids are given the opportunity to be to not go to school hungry and are ready to learn, I mean, what a simple thing. I can't believe that that's even something that we have to worry about.
Go.
Have a computer at home.
All right, I want to go back to what James said, going back to Shaw, because a couple of years ago we visited the island where Charlotte Stratus.
To me, it's one of that culture's fine.
All right.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right. A couple of years ago we visited the island off Scotland where Charlotte's family came from, and we were told that on one day, 10% of that island emigrated to Canada, including her great-great-grandfather.
Well, not necessarily on that day.
On that day, but 1/10, and that was because the English enacted poor laws. And so the landlords that had too high a percentage of poor people on their property had to pay higher taxes than those that had not as many poor people. And so it was cheaper to export your poor people to Canada, in the Scottish case, than it was to pay the higher taxes. So there are a number of Americans that fall into that category as descendants of those people. So it's a discussion that's gone on for a long time.
That's how my family got here too. And my grandfather was very anti-New Deal, whereas my other grandparents were very union. My grandpa was a truck driver, so it's interesting that I've got one from each side. But yes, the Scottish, the Highland clearance, or whatever the right word is, term for that. That's how mine got here too. And then they were very anti-government. So interesting.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm not sure where Mike was going with the example, but it does point out how you have to be very careful of how you structure things. The per tax was supposed to help people, but in the end it didn't. So it's just as we know, unintended consequences.
Of your ancestors emigrating and
Well, they emigrated to the people of Nova Scotia. The government of Nova Scotia had to write to the UK government and tell them that they had to stop it because they were just dumping people into situations in which they were in some ways as poor or maybe even poorer than they had been in Scotland, because there just wasn't anything there for them. They were all crowded onto a small islands, and bad farming land. All the good farming land was gone. So, but it's the age-old tale of unintended consequences.
yes.
Which I think, as we look at these discussions of solutions to the poverty issue, we have to be so careful about, and it's so hard. We can't be frozen and not do anything because of that fear, but it does require people to be very careful about it. I think he mentions, for example, being careful about you can't ban payday loans entirely, because where are people going to go for credit that they need? So you do have to look at all these solutions very critically.
All right.
So just to support what I was saying on page 133 in the book, he says, politics in America is a dismal, ugly business these days. Intense polarization, disturbing threats, partisan gridlock, calling for transformational federal policies to abolish poverty might sound hopelessly naive. Then again, Congress responded with bold bipartisan relief during the pandemic, making more progress on poverty than we've seen in generations. And the sad thing is, there was just a New York Times poll that people were saying they were nostalgic for the Trump presidency because things were so wonderful then, which flies in the face of the facts, and that the pandemic was such a threat that there was some good bipartisan money, and that's why we haven't gone into a recession. And we did reduce child poverty, and we did get more people housing. But because control of the House changed in 2022, which is only 2 years ago, that's why things seem so much worse now. And the positive things don't get the attention that they should be getting.
Well, Larry, you do fit in with one of the other change of viewpoint perspective that I picked up on his book, and it was to celebrate what does work and make it known, because there is there's, the phrase, the poor will always be with us. So automatically you walk into a situation where people think, oh, geez, you can't do anything. So I thought that too was another good takeaway for me, is celebrate what works. And even if it isn't totally a success, go ahead anyway and point out what it does do.
Because we don't hear about those things that do work and I mean, I am just completely blanking on this, but somewhere in the book, the author wrote about, and I believe, was it something that happened during COVID? But funds and how it was successful, but it got overshadowed by, and Nancy, I see you shaking. I wish I could remember what it was, but how it was overshadowed by other things. And then it kind of fell away and nobody really, even the public, we never really had the opportunity to know that it was something that was successful.
Right. Was it the extra money given for children?
Oh, maybe that was it.
Or the added unemployment money, maybe.
Or the money to subsidize rent payments so people wouldn't be evicted. And that was a situation where he describes that eviction rates fell way down. But then after the money went away, then they've gone back up to their pre-pandemic levels.
Well,
Right.
to build on what Larry said, some of these problems are so big and so diffuse across the country, it is going to take the national government to deal with them. And once again, it gets back to who is running things. And we have one party that doesn't think government can do anything right. And that's their, that's the thing since Reagan, get government out of our lives. Well, that brings an awful lot of cost to other people with that sort of philosophy. And yeah, the book's good, but what are we going to do with it? I mean, how many people are going to read it? It really comes down to how people view this next election and what they decide what kind of leadership they want. And to me, it seems like a no-brainer. I don't even know why we're talking about some of this stuff, because we got climate control that is going to make it irrelevant whether we're rich or poor in about 20 or 30 years. I think, there's other things to worry about, and we should be worried about, we should be dealing with. The only people, and I come from government, full disclosure here, so I spend most of my life working on policy stuff and trying to figure out what works best across Wisconsin. And that's the kind of thing that those people in Washington that get so disrespectful do. Try to figure out what are the unintended consequences, what's going to work, what worked in the past, what'll go forward. And they don't even start working if nobody passes legislation to correct some of this stuff. The Great Society and stuff Lyndon Baines Johnson did, it was outstanding in beginning to address some of this stuff. And the fact that that's starting to fall away is not good. And in 1925, I think, or 2025, I think the tax law that was passed that gave everybody $1 trillion tax cut falls away for everybody but the richest people in the country. And so tax policy is going to be the next big issue coming up in 25. So, we got to have some people with a lot of time that can address a really lot of bad problems. And, in the end, what can I do as a citizen? Well, give money to people I support who are going to support my view, and then vote. And that's it, and talk about it. But, I'm old. Nobody listens to us old white guys anymore. So,
And
but
a lot of
I'm happy to tell anybody who asks me what I think.
Al, you're wrong. Our age group votes more than anybody else.
I'm aware of that, but you see polling data, I just can't believe it. Oh, never mind. I don't want to.
Well, the one thing we haven't mentioned is the role that abortion and access to reproductive care plays in poverty. And I'm looking at the bottom of page 154 when he says, we could ensure that no child in America is born into poverty. We could make sure all women have access to the best contraception and healthcare, helping more pregnancies become intentional and safer. We could provide new mothers with strong supports like paid parental leave and free childcare, which is all to say a country as wealthy as ours could put our money where our mouth is when it comes to supporting life. But from the poor, we just seem to just take and take. I'm going to predict right now that this election will go well because not just younger women, but other people realize having a Supreme Court decision that overturned 50 years of precedent and took away a freedom that people had for 50 years, that's going to be one of the motivating issues that is going to help the people that do want to address poverty. You've seen it happen in red states where they've had the opportunity to vote on it. And there's now going to be on the ballot in Florida and hopefully Arizona, where people are going to be able to vote for what really is the pro-life position. Because as George Carlin years ago famously said, the pro-life people only care about the babies until they're born. And once they're born, then they're on their own.
Yep, the same people that claim to be pro-life are the ones voting against funding for school lunches and funding for medical care for children and pregnant people, and yeah, but yet they're quote unquote pro-life. Yeah.
Because babies
pro-life
are.
is different from pro-eating. So I know.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Never mind. It was a joke, but it only worked once.
Oh. But to get back to your point, Larry, about the, people thinking the economy was better, and I've read a bunch of articles about this. It all comes down to grocery prices because that's what people see every week. And groceries were cheaper before the pandemic. But what happened was, and there's, a lot of evidence to this, is that then mega corporations who control the food industry used the actual supply chain issues and other things to, they're seeing record profits over the last 2 years. And that's the real issue with the grocery prices, is that you've got Albertsons and I forget what the other big corporation is, are showing record profits. And so, yeah, when people go to the grocery store every week and their groceries are 25% higher, they're looking back nostalgically at, 2019. And they're forgetting all the other stuff, like all the people that died because of COVID and all the other things that were not great about the Orange Guy's years in office.
Right. The Daily Show had a little compilation of all the talking heads. And you know how they'd always say, are you better off than you were today than you were 4 years ago? Well, they don't say that now. Now they say, are you better off than you were 5 years ago or 3 years ago? They're purposely making us forget that 2020 ever happened. So, but I don't think any of us have forgotten that 2020 happened. All right. Do we have anybody else have anything to say about this book?
It was a worthwhile read.
I'm glad I read it.
Yeah. But Al, you said the only thing we can do is vote. We can also talk to other people and get them to vote too. So we gotta get everybody out and get them to take a stake in the future here.
Well,
and write postcards. Indivisible is, having people write postcards.
Yeah. And just have, if topics come up, think about some of the viewpoint shifts that we could make in the conversation. Look, the country's really rich, yes, it's a hard task, but things do work. So I think just being attuned, not to a hard sell, but just start trying to make a shift in people's perspective.
Yeah, and I think saying billionaires just pay what they owe, not even asking for them to have an increased tax, just pay what they owe, like the rest of us have to do. Yeah, I don't know how they get so protected, but somehow I suppose they bought it somehow. Okay, well, great discussion. I knew it was going to be. And so I guess I didn't bring my book downstairs with me. So next month we are reading James by Percival Everett. And I started James last month and I had to stop because I was blowing through it too quickly. And I needed to stop myself and spend some time and savor it because it is so good. And I'm saying this is going to be the book of the year. So we're going to talk.
We spent, after the eclipse, we went up to Hannibal for a day and walked through the sites at Hannibal. And so I started to read James today, and I was just relating it to the town of Hannibal. So it was very interesting.
Excellent. All right. But I'll say that Percival Everett is such a great writer. You don't have to travel to Missouri if you don't have time or desire. he'll take you there just through the page. Okay, so we are going to discuss that on Wednesday, May 15th at 6:00. That also happens to be scholarship night for River Valley. And because James is not looking at me, I'm going to say James, once again, is generously giving 4, 5, 6, I can't remember how many we're doing this year, scholarships to high school seniors. And he has been doing that for the last 10 years or so. So, yay to James.
Thank you, James.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Nancy, is the James book only hardcover at this point?
Right. Yep. It just came out last month. You can check out your local library, or you could get it from Libro.
No, it's just that I'm going to be traveling, and it's just something I can't really carry with me. I'll be back on May 14th, but I won't have the ability of carrying a hardcover book because I'll be hiking.
Okay. Well,
Not too big, Diane.
yeah, it depends on how tired you are. You probably could blow through it as soon as you get home.
Well, Mary Pat, you've done this hike. Can I carry that book?
No.
Where are you going?
It's that
I'm-
Wednesday. It's just
go
a
ahead.
couple of days before Sutnamite weekend in Stoughton. That Friday, Saturday, Sunday for all things celebratory in Norwegian. So you should come on down.
Diane?
Charlotte, I'm hiking the last 70 miles of the Camino.
No, you can't carry the book.
No.
You can do it on if you get it on your iPhone. You can't even take a laptop. I mean, you can't even take an iPad.
Charlotte did the whole thing.
Not taking a laptop, taking as little as possible.
Well, start reading it now.
Nancy?
Larry? Yeah.
So I'm really sorry that I'm going to miss that discussion because I love Huck Finn, and I bought the book from Arcadia and I will read it and I will watch the discussion because we have our Broadway series tickets for Moulin Rouge. But I would like to take a minute to hold on. I would just like to tell a quick story that's related. When I was 20 years old and a student teacher at La Follette High School in Madison, I was fortunate enough that the students were reading the end of Huckleberry Finn. So I got to teach the last chapter of Huckleberry Finn, where he decides he's got to get out of there before they try to civilize him. And it coincided with Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run album, which literally changed my life. So as a student teacher, we read the end of Huck Finn, and then I used a mimeograph machine to make copies of the lyrics of Born to Run, because the runaway American dream and tramps like us, we've got to get out of this place. It's a great parallel. So I encourage everybody to listen to Born to Run before, during, or after you read James. And I look forward to watching the discussion.
Excellent. All-American book and All-American album. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks, folks. As always, great discussion from,
Thank you.
Thank you.
yes. All
Very
right.
good.
We'll see you all next month.